The office smelled like burnt coffee and betrayal. At exactly 9:06 a.m., my keycard flashed red. Not yellow. Not delayed. Red. I stood frozen in front of the biometric door I had personally designed 5 years ago, holding a lukewarm thermos and yesterday's file folder. On the other side, I could hear muffled voices and the sound of the CEO's son-in-law laughing. I checked my email. Subject line: transition notification. No meeting. No warning. A memo signed off by Jason Teller, the smug Harvard baby who married into the boardroom and now apparently ran it. I had been fired by a line of text. Legacy redundancy, it said. In a room I built from scratch. Every inch of it, from the glass panels to the product roadmap pinned to the wall, mine. But what they forgot was the name on the $840 million patent. My maiden name. Legally mine. And when the system collapsed without me, it wasn't just failure. It was karma filed under corporate litigation. My name is Evelyn K. 54 years old. Systems architect. Patent holder. Divorced twice. No kids. But don't confuse solitude with failure. My life has always lived in wires, prototypes, and quiet victories that didn't need applause. The mornings start early. Always. I still set 2 alarms. One for 5:15 and one backup at 5:20 just in case. Muscle memory takes me straight to the stovetop espresso maker. An old ritual from my Barcelona internship days. The tiles in my kitchen are faded blue, chipped at the corners, but I refuse to replace them. They remind me of my mother's kitchen back in Boston. By 6:30, I'm usually reviewing code or drafting diagrams with Bach playing in the background. No vocals. Just precision. A language that never lied to me. Scene 2 is always the office. Or it was. Desk 14B in the West Wing. Minimalist setup. 2 screens. A wireless sketch pad. A ceramic coaster from a tech conference I once keynote. Everyone else had acrylic badges. Mine was rail metal. I wasn't loud. But people knew. Evelyn was the one who could debug a crisis mid-presentation. Evelyn was the one they trusted with encryption protocols and back-end structure. Evelyn was the one they forgot to promote last cycle, but still leaned on to finish the final build. I carried pride in callous fingers, not corporate smiles. Even the janitor knew my schedule. He once left a sticky note that said, "You forgot your tea on the 3rd floor again." I kept it in my drawer. My world wasn't big, but it was steady, predictable, purposeful. Until Jason Teller walked in with cufflinks and a slide deck, and a mission to modernize the company. Modernize, he called it. Erase, I would soon realize. 5 years ago, I sat in a windowless lab at 2 a.m. with a migraine and a loop of failing code. I stayed until dawn, rewriting, reworking, patching line by line until the prototype finally hummed. That was the first working model of what would later be called NovaPulse, the power optimization module that would transform our industry's infrastructure. They called it revolutionary. But before it had a name, it had a signature. Mine. I filed the patent under my maiden name, Evelyn March, after my father passed. It was my quiet tribute. No one noticed. Or so I thought. In the beginning, Jason was just a blurry figure in quarterly meetings, always 2 seats behind the CFO, always nodding like he understood the blueprints. He started appearing more often, first in strategy huddles, then leading them. He was charming, clean-cut, the kind of guy HR posts on their diversity panels. I first felt the tremor at last year's launch event. They gave Jason the mic. The applause rang loud when he spoke about innovation, but his slides were mine, my framework, my team's development path, my legacy stripped of attribution. I waited for him to acknowledge the engineers. He didn't. I waited for someone to speak up. No one did. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror of the event hotel, rubbing my wrist where the guest pass chafed. I told myself I was imagining things. But a month later, my name vanished from the internal version control logs. 2 months after that, he assigned a junior to shadow my project. And then came the board meetings I wasn't invited to. I began waking up before the alarm. I reread old emails. I noticed the way conversations in the break room hushed when I entered. Still, I kept building. I told myself they couldn't erase work written in code. I was wrong. It happened at the quarterly town hall. The auditorium buzzed with catered sandwiches and forced optimism. Jason stood on stage, smiling like a news anchor, flanked by 2 new VPs I had never met. The crowd leaned forward as he introduced Project Horizon, the company's bold new initiative. On the screen behind him, I saw it. A sleek graphic of the Novopulse core with a new name slapped over it. Pulse AI. He called it our next frontier. I stood at the back near the exit pretending to check my phone, but my hands had gone cold. I could hear my own heartbeat over the applause. Jason clicked to the next slide. A list of contributors. My name wasn't there, but Ava Langston's was. The junior who had shadowed me. The intern whose code I had rewritten 3 times to prevent data loss. I pushed through the crowd. I needed air. In the hallway, I ran into Martin, the former department head. He looked uncomfortable. Said he was sorry about the presentation. Said he tried to raise it in a meeting, but Jason had dismissed it as a clerical oversight. Clerical? Martin's eyes darted away. He offered me a pitying smile before slipping back inside. I stood alone by the water cooler, watching people laugh through the glass wall, like I was no longer part of their species. I thought of my father's hands. Ink-stained from blueprints, his voice saying, "Always sign your work, Evie." Jason hadn't just stolen my work. He had trained the company to forget me. That night, I sat in my apartment with my mother's old teacup, still faintly scented with chamomile. My inbox pinged. A company-wide memo announcing my official exit. Exit. As if I had walked out willingly. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened the patent archive, typed in March, and smiled. The next morning, I dug out an old journal from the bottom drawer. Its pages smelled like dust and ink. Inside were sketches, notes, timestamps, and the original schematic of Novopulse, my handwriting curling along the edges. I flipped to a page labeled simply Dad. It held a to-do list from the week I took care of him. Next to it, a quote I'd scribbled. "Your silence is not their victory." That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying Jason's voice, Ava's nervous smile, the way no one looked me in the eye anymore. I remembered the first day I walked into that building, how proud I was, how hard I worked to stay, how little they remembered. But the patent hadn't been filed by Evelyn K. It was registered to Evelyn March. I sat up, pulled out my old hard drive and began sorting files. Date-stamped designs, email threads, the patent submission receipt, even screenshots of the internal code log before my name disappeared. They wanted clean optics. But I kept receipts. I wasn't out. I was preparing. I started with a lawyer. Well tried. The first one I approached chuckled, said it was a classic case of corporate red tape and suggested I negotiate a severance. The second one said the patent belonged to the company since I'd filed it while employed, until I told her it was registered under my maiden name, unaffiliated with the firm's legal entity. She scheduled a follow-up. Meanwhile, I drafted a press brief. Just a simple document outlining the timeline of Novopulse, the discrepancies in the launch materials, and the name mismatch in the patent registry. I sent it anonymously to one journalist I trusted from an old TED Talk I gave. Silence. Then a call. She asked one question, "Do you have proof?" I emailed a zip file. 3 hours later, she replied with a single line. "This will hit Monday." But Friday brought a snag. I got a cease and desist email from Jason's office. They knew. They were nervous. They accused me of stealing company property. I almost folded. Almost. Instead, I printed my patent registration, highlighted the signature line, and waited. Monday morning, the article dropped. The woman behind Pulse AI. A patent they forgot. Within hours, it spread across tech forums, LinkedIn, even Reddit. My inbox flooded. Some were old colleagues. Some were strangers. A few were apologies in disguise. By noon, the company issued a bland response. By 2, they scheduled an emergency board meeting. And by 5, I was standing in front of a long glass table in their headquarters, invited this time. Jason looked pale. Ava avoided eye contact. I laid out my materials. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just walked them through it. The filing, the development, the omissions, the screenshots, the registration line that read, Evelyn March. Someone from legal tried to interrupt. I slid forward an envelope. Inside, a formal request for licensing fees, retroactive credit, and independent ownership of Pulse AI's core technology. They could use it, but they had to pay. Jason leaned back, mouth tight. The board murmured. One woman nodded slowly. I gathered my things, said I'd await their decision, turned, and walked out. The glass doors hissed shut behind me. 2 months passed. They paid. Quietly. Generously. I declined the offer to return. I didn't want my old desk. I didn't want Ava's apology. I wanted peace. I moved into a sunlit apartment near the harbor. Started teaching part-time at a local university. One of my students asked if she could write her thesis on Pulse AI. I said she could, if she credited Evelyn March. On Sundays, I walk along the marina. I planted herbs on the windowsill. I finally replaced the chip tiles in the kitchen. Last week, I opened my drawer. The sticky note was still there. You forgot your tea on the 3rd floor again. I smiled and threw it away. Not all theft is loud. Some is quiet. A name omitted. A door card revoked. A room that no longer remembers who wired its lights. But legacy isn't what they give you. It's what you sign, what you protect, and what you're willing to reclaim. Even if you have to do it alone. Some endings come like emails at 9:06 a.m. But others arrive with silence, with calm, with the full weight of truth settling gently into place. My father once told me that real architecture isn't made of steel. It's made of memory. If this story reminded you to fight for what's yours, subscribe for more stories of quiet justice and personal power.